Canada makes a claim to the North Pole. Live Science reports Tom Metcalf. All this time, I thought Canada had a claim to the North Pole because Canada's right there. The Northern Territories are right there. And as a Canadian citizen, I'm ashamed to say I didn't even know Canada did not have a claim to the North Pole. But anyway, let's go into the article. The mystique of the North Pole. At the very top of the world, has long driven explorers to risk their lives in the Arctic, while all those of us not so adventurously inclined look on in awe. Now, 3 northern nations are vying to stake their claim to part of the Arctic seafloor, a region chock full of fossil fuels that lies under thousands of miles of water and ice. Late last month, Canada threw its metaphorical hat into the ring, joining Russia and Denmark in arguing that science is on their side in laying claim to almost 500,000 square miles of underwater Arctic territory based on the extent of its continental shelf, including the geographic North Pole. At the center of the debate is the 1,100-mile long or 1,800-kilometer Lomonosov Ridge. It's a region at a depth of around 5,600 feet or 1,700 meters that runs near the pole and bisects the Arctic Ocean. The ridge, which is about the size of California, is considered a promising source for oil and gas. This is according to New York Times. So who owns that area of the seafloor? To establish their case, Canadian officials have submitted a 2,100-page report to a scientific committee of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Seas, UNCLOS, detailing the size and shape of the continental shelf along Canada's Arctic coastline. The extent of the continental shelf was determined by scientists on board several ship-based expeditions to the polar ocean between 2006 and 2016. After the Canadian submission is evaluated by the UN committee, probably in several years' time, the 3 nations will start negotiations on the final delimitations of the Arctic territory, including their competing claims to the pole. Regardless of the outcome, the seawater and ice above the North Pole will remain an area of open navigation for ships from any country. This is what Michael Byers says. He's the author of International Law and the Arctic. 90 degrees north, Byers explains that UNCLOS lets nations claim an exclusive economic zone, EEZ. That's like the exclusive economic zone that we were talking about 2 videos before this one. Turkey illegally drilling of the US gas deposit in East Mediterranean, Cyprus Israeli fields. Those are the exclusive economic zones that we talk about, that ExxonMobil has the right to drill. Turkey tried stopping them, and they didn't succeed because the US Navy was protecting that area. And Turkey is illegally drilling anyway, so I guess the US Navy has to have more ships there to protect those rights. Now, 90 degrees north, Byers explained that the UNCLOS lets nations claim exclusive economic zone, EEZ, at sea within 200 miles of their coastlines. But if the claim is supported by scientific evidence, the convention also lets nations claim territory out to a much greater distance, something that's based to the extent of their continental shelf. All 3 countries' scientists take the view that it is the same continental shelf all the way around the ocean because North America used to be part of the same continent as Eurasia. This is what Byers told Live Science. North America, including Greenland, separated from the Eurasian continent about 60 million years ago, forming today's Arctic Ocean. Ice cold? Since 2006, scientists worked for the Canadian government have staged 17 shipboard expeditions into the Arctic to gather data about the outer limits of the continental shelf. The most recent expeditions took place in 2014, 15, and 16. Oceanographer Mary Lynn Dixon the director of the UNCLOS program for the Government Department Natural Resources Canada and the chief scientist on board the 2016 expedition, said the scientists involved had made a strong argument for defining the limits of Canada's continental shelf. The different Canadian expeditions studied bathymetric data from the oceans and geophysical data from the seafloor over an area of more than 463,000 square miles of the Arctic to determine the extent of Canada's underwater continental shelf, the Barrett's Observer reported. The studies included inspections of the seafloor by autonomous underwater vehicles, or AUVs, essential in areas where heavy ice made working from the ship impossible, and even rock samples from thousands of feet below that she told Life Science were rarer than moon rocks. Frozen fuel. Frozen fuel? The Canadian submission to the extent of its territory in the Arctic comes amid a flurry of interest in the region among powerful world nations, including Russia, the United States, and China. For decades, the North Pole has been covered by thick sea ice for most of the year, but international interest has been spurred by the prospects of climate change in the Arctic, making the region open to ships for longer periods each year. Undersea natural resources may also play a part. An estimated 90 billion barrels of oil and trillions of cubic feet of natural gas are thought to lie under the polar oceans, according to the U.S. Geological Survey, although the central North Pole region is not thought to be especially rich in fossil fuels. Canada, Denmark, and Russia are likely to be more interested in undersea fuel reserves that lay closer to their coastlines than in distant and frozen North Pole, said political scientist Andreas Osthagen of the Fridtjof Nansen Institute in Norway. He said, they are struggling to utilize or exploit resources that are much closer to shore. So from a resource perspective, I don't really see how this matters at all. Ownership of the North Pole itself is an important symbol of national prestige, however. This displays to the narrative of Arctic sovereignty, protecting your Arctic territory, and upholding your Arctic presence, he said. The North Pole is a symbolic prize in all this. Byers said that Canada, Denmark, and Russia have all agreed to abide by the results of the UNCLOS negotiations. Quote, this is a really exciting story about science being used to resolve issues that otherwise might cause tensions between different states, he said. Here we have the Canadian claims. Scientific study from 17 Arctic expeditions show its continental shelf extends beyond the geographic North Pole. This is according to the map created by Geological Survey of Canada, Natural Resources Canada. This is really a little bit confusing, isn't it? You see Canada. Greenland is owned by Denmark. So that's why Denmark, of course, has a very large claim to the North Pole region. You have the United States through Alaska on the left here on the map. And you have Russia, of course, on the upper left, all the way towards the going around on top of the map. So it's actually 4 countries. It's Canada, Russia, Denmark, and of course United States through Alaska. Amazing. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.